She didn't know the man watching her had already decided who would live and who would die that night. From the shadowed corner of the restaurant, his eyes never left her. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she was breaking in a way most people never noticed. The empty chair across from her told a familiar story. Someone had promised to come. Someone hadn't. Outside, a black car waited with its engine running. Inside his phone, a message blinked once, orders confirmed. Targets in position? All it would take was one word. Instead, he watched her stand up, straighten her dress, and smile politely at a world that had just humiliated her. For the first time in years, his hand hesitated. Because if he stood up and walked toward her, this wouldn't be a passing moment. It would be a mistake. And mistakes were the one thing a man like him could never afford. This hook is built to stop scrolling. She checked her phone again, though she already knew nothing had changed. The message was still there, sitting quietly at the bottom of the screen, like an unfinished promise, "I'm on my way." It had been sent 30 minutes ago. Haley sat alone at a small round table in the middle of a crowded restaurant, surrounded by laughter, clinking glasses, and couples leaning close to one another as if the world beyond their table did not exist. The candle in front of her had burned low, its flame trembling slightly, mirroring the way her chest felt tight, restrained, refusing to break. The dress she wore was too elegant for an empty chair. She had chosen it carefully this morning, debating for far too long over something that now felt foolish. It wasn't flashy, just soft and graceful, the kind of dress meant for a first date that might turn into something more. Now it made her feel exposed, like she had dressed for an audience that never arrived. She didn't cry. Haley had learned, over the years, how to swallow disappointment before it reached her eyes. Instead, her heart slowed, settling into a familiar rhythm, the quiet resignation of someone who had been left waiting more times than she cared to admit. Across the room, in the shadowed corner where the light barely touched, a man in a black suit set his glass of whiskey down without making a sound. Ethan had not planned to stay this long. He rarely lingered anywhere that wasn't controlled, measured, or necessary. Restaurants were usually a formality for him, neutral ground for negotiations, places where deals were sealed behind polite smiles and expensive wine. Tonight had been no different. He had come, sat, observed, and waited for his contact. But somewhere between the first sip of whiskey and the quiet hum of conversation, his attention had shifted to her. He had noticed Haley not when she walked in, but when she realized she was alone. There was something in the way her shoulders stiffened, the way her fingers tightened briefly around her phone before she placed it face down on the table. She lifted her chin, straightened her back, and forced a polite smile for the waiter who asked if she needed anything else. It wasn't sadness that caught Ethan's attention. It was pride, standing stubbornly in the middle of humiliation. She was trying not to disappear. Ethan studied her with an intensity that surprised even himself. Not because she was beautiful, though she was in a quiet, unassuming way. It was the expression she wore, carefully composed, like a cracked mirror still trying to reflect something whole. When she finally stood, slipping her chair back with deliberate calm, Ethan felt an unfamiliar tightening in his chest. He watched her reach for her purse, already preparing to walk out with dignity intact. Before she could take more than 2 steps, the waiter gently stopped her. "Miss," he said, glancing down at the receipt in his hand, "your dinner has been taken care of." Haley froze. Confusion flickered across her face as she turned slowly, scanning the room. Her gaze landed on Ethan almost by instinct, as if some part of her already knew. Their eyes met. Ethan inclined his head just slightly. No smile, no attempt to charm, just acknowledgement. She hesitated, then walked toward him, stopping a polite distance away. "I think there's been a mistake," she said softly. "I didn't ask." "It wasn't a mistake," Ethan replied, his voice calm, low, steady. "You were waiting for someone." Something about the way he said it, not accusing, not curious, made her chest tighten. "That doesn't mean she began. Not everyone arrives when they promise." He interrupted gently, "But everyone deserves to finish their dinner." The words landed differently than she expected. There was no flirtation in his tone, no pity, just a simple truth, offered without expectation. For a moment, Haley forgot how to breathe. She searched his face, looking for hidden intentions, for the familiar signs she had learned to distrust. She found none. His expression was composed, almost guarded, but his eyes were steady, observant, as if he truly saw her standing there not as an opportunity, not as an inconvenience, but as a person. "Thank you," she said at last. The words came out quieter than she intended. Ethan nodded once, already reaching for his glass again, signaling the end of the exchange. Haley turned and walked away, her steps measured, her spine straight. She did not look back. She told herself it didn't matter. Told herself it was just a small kindness from a stranger she would never see again. But as she pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped into the night air, she felt something shift inside her, something fragile, something she had not realized was still capable of responding. Inside the restaurant, Ethan watched the door close behind her. For a long moment, he remained still. Then his phone vibrated against the table. He glanced at the screen. The message was brief, efficient, final, targets confirmed, location secured, awaiting your command. Outside, somewhere beyond the glow of the restaurant windows, a black car idled at the curb. Men inside waited silently, hands resting near concealed weapons, eyes scanning reflections in darkened glass. Ethan picked up his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. For years, decisions like this had been effortless. Life or death reduced to logistics, names, locations, timing. He had built an empire on never hesitating, never allowing emotion to interfere with necessity. But tonight, something lingered in his mind. The way Haley had straightened her shoulders, the way she had refused to let the room see her break, the quiet dignity of someone who had been disappointed and chose not to beg for understanding. His phone vibrated again. Boss, came the tense voice on the other end when he answered. They've traced movement near your last known location. We need confirmation. Ethan's gaze drifted back to the door, to the place where she had disappeared moments earlier. Stand down, he said. There was a pause. Sir, delay everything, Ethan repeated, his voice cold, unmistakably final. Tonight, no blood is spilled. Silence followed. Confusion. Obedience. He ended the call and set the phone down, his reflection staring back at him in the dark surface of the table. For the first time in years, Ethan had postponed a purge not because it was strategic, but because of a woman who didn't even know his name. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. This was a mistake. And yet, for reasons he could not explain, it was the first one that felt inevitable. Outside, Haley walked into the night, unaware that the stranger who had paid for her dinner had just altered the course of more than one life. And that by accepting a simple kindness, she had stepped unknowingly into a world where love was dangerous. Protection had a price, and nothing, absolutely nothing, came without consequences. If this story touched your heart, follow the channel to enjoy many more heart-stirring stories every week. Haley told herself not to think about the stranger from the restaurant. She succeeded for exactly 2 days. On the third morning, rain fell in thin silver lines, turning the city into a blur of reflections. Haley ducked into a small cafe near her office, shaking water from her umbrella and brushing damp hair from her cheek. The place was warm, crowded, alive with the smell of coffee and baked bread. She ordered her usual, paid, and turned, then stopped short. He was standing 2 steps behind her, the same black coat, though less formal than the suit she remembered, the same composed stillness, as if noise bent around him instead of passing through. When their eyes met, there was no surprise in his expression, only recognition, calm and deliberate. Good morning, he said, as if they had planned this meeting. Haley's first instinct was to laugh. Her second was to step back. Instead, she folded both impulses into a careful smile. I didn't expect to see you again. I did, he replied. Something in his tone made her pause. Not arrogance, not assumption, just certainty. They collected their drinks in silence and found a small table by the window. Rain tapped gently against the glass, sealing them into a private pocket of time. For a moment, Haley wondered if she should leave. She wondered, too, why she didn't want to. I never thanked you properly, she said. For the other night. You did. He said, you didn't owe me more. That's not what I meant. She hesitated, then met his gaze. You didn't have to do that. No. He agreed. I wanted to. There it was again, that careful honesty, offered without performance. Haley found herself relaxing despite her better judgment. I'm Haley. I know. He caught himself, then added smoothly, you said your name to the waiter. She raised an eyebrow, but let it pass. And you are Ethan. They spoke of simple things after that. Work, the city, the cafe's questionable pastries. Ethan didn't dominate the conversation or retreat into silence. He listened, truly listened, as if her words mattered beyond politeness. Haley noticed the way his eyes tracked movement behind her, how his posture subtly shifted whenever the door opened. He seemed at once present and alert, relaxed and ready. When she stood to leave, he rose with her. "Let me walk you. It's just across the street," she said. "I know." She considered refusing, then shrugged. "Fine. Outside." The rain had softened into mist. They crossed together, his pace instinctively matching hers. A car rolled past too slowly, its windows dark. Haley barely noticed it. Ethan did. His jaw tightened for a fraction of a second, then smoothed. At her building, she stopped. "This is me?" "I know," he said again, then corrected himself with a faint smile. "I mean, good." They stood there, an awkward pause stretching between them. Haley broke it first. "You don't usually let things end unfinished, do you?" Ethan studied her, weighing something unseen. "No," he said. "I don't." That night, Ethan watched the street from the backseat of his car as Haley disappeared into her building. His driver asked no questions. The men flanking him remained silent. On his phone, reports flowed in movement tracked, threats assessed, risks calculated. Ethan ignored them all for 3 minutes. Then he issued quiet orders. "Increase surveillance. Rotate vehicles. Keep distance. No contact." "She's not part of this," he said, and the words carried the weight of command. Days passed, then weeks. Ethan did not chase Haley. He did not send flowers or messages. Instead, he appeared briefly, coincidentally at the edges of her routine. At the crosswalk when the light lingered red. At the bookstore when she reached for a title she hadn't read since college. Once, outside her office building, when the sky threatened rain and she had forgotten her umbrella. "You again," she said, half amused, half suspicious. "Unfortunate timing," he replied, handing her an umbrella. "For the weather." She laughed then, a soft sound that surprised them both. The closeness grew in increments too small to fear. A coffee here, a shared silence there. Haley told herself it was harmless. Ethan told himself it was temporary. Both were wrong. One evening, they sat on a park bench as dusk bled into night. Streetlights flickered on, illuminating the city in soft gold. Haley spoke about her childhood, about learning early not to expect too much. Ethan listened, hands clasped loosely, gaze steady. "People leave," she said, not bitterly, just honest, eventually. Ethan felt the words like a challenge. He did not answer. A shout echoed from across the park, a sudden movement. Haley startled. Ethan was on his feet instantly, stepping in front of her without thinking. His body angled, protective, his focus sharp. "It's nothing," Haley said, though her heart raced. Ethan remained still for a moment longer, then sat back down, visibly forcing himself to relax. Haley watched him closely now. "You do that a lot," she said. "Shield first, ask questions later." He met her gaze, old habit. From where he held her eyes, then looked away, from surviving. That night, after Ethan left her at her door, Haley stood in the quiet of her apartment and pressed a hand to her chest. The feeling there was unfamiliar and unsettling. Trust, perhaps, or the dangerous beginning of it. Elsewhere, Ethan faced a different reckoning. Romano's name surfaced again, persistent, deliberate. A warning wrapped in civility. Ethan read the message once, then deleted it. He knew what was coming. He also knew what he was risking. He looked at the city skyline, lights burning against the dark. Haley was becoming more than a passing moment, more than a distraction. She was becoming a variable. And in Ethan's world, variables had a way of turning deadly. The first rule Haley set for herself was simple: don't ask questions you're not ready to hear the answers to. It was a rule she broke slowly. By the third week of knowing Ethan, patterns began to emerge quiet, almost invisible ones. He always chose where they sat, not the best view, not the most romantic corner, but the place where his back faced the wall and his line of sight covered every entrance. He never walked on the side closest to the street. When they crossed roads, he stepped half a pace ahead of her, his body angled just enough to block. At first, Haley told herself it was attentiveness. Then she realized it was instinct. They were leaving a late screening one night when it became impossible to ignore. The street was dim, the kind of half-lit stretch where shadows felt longer than they should. Haley was mid-sentence when Ethan stopped abruptly, his hand closing around her wrist. "Wait," he said. A car idled at the corner, engine low, lights off. Haley hadn't noticed it until Ethan shifted, placing himself between her and the street without thinking. "It's probably nothing," she said, trying to sound calm. Ethan didn't answer immediately. His gaze was fixed, calculating, his body taut with readiness. Only when the car drove off did he release her wrist, stepping back as if he'd crossed a line. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to." "It's fine," Haley replied, though her pulse was racing. "You just reacted." "Yes," he said quietly. They walked the rest of the way in silence. Later that night, Haley lay awake in bed, replaying the moment, the way his hand had tightened, the way his eyes had hardened not with fear, but with familiarity. She had seen that look before, though never this close. On men who had lived too long in dangerous places, the space between them was changing. The next evening, Ethan cooked for her. It surprised Haley more than it should have. She had expected reservation-only restaurants and polished experiences. Instead, she found herself standing in his kitchen, watching him move with the same quiet precision he carried everywhere else. He rolled up the sleeves of his shirt, exposing forearms marked by faint scars he did not comment on. "You don't seem like someone who cooks," she said lightly. "I don't seem like a lot of things," Ethan replied. Dinner was simple. Pasta, wine, conversation that hovered just beneath something deeper. Haley felt herself relaxing despite the questions pressing at the back of her mind. Then his phone buzzed. Once, twice, again. Ethan glanced at the screen and turned it face down without reading it. "Everything okay?" Haley asked. "Yes." The answer came too fast. Another buzz. Then another. Haley watched his jaw tighten. The ease of the evening cracked. Just slightly. "You don't have to ignore it because I'm here," she said. Ethan met her gaze. For a moment, something flickered their conflict, restraint, a decision being made. Then he shook his head. "It's not for tonight." The words unsettled her more than honesty would have. After dinner, they stood by the window, city lights spreading beneath them. Haley traced a finger along the glass. "You live like you're always waiting for something to go wrong." Ethan didn't deny it, because things usually do. She turned to face him. "You don't trust easily. I trust selectively." "And where do I fall?" she asked before she could stop herself. The question hung between them, dangerous in its simplicity. Ethan's expression softened. Just barely. "You fall outside the rules." That should have been flattering. Instead, it felt like a warning. The turning point came days later. They were in an elevator together, descending from his building late at night. The space was small, enclosed, the hum of cables filling the silence. Halfway down, the lights flickered. Then went out. The elevator jolted to a stop. Haley gasped, her hand flying to the railing. "Is this—" "Stay still," Ethan said. Not panicked, not raised, commanding. A metallic sound echoed above them. Footsteps, too heavy to belong to maintenance. Before Haley could speak, Ethan moved. He pulled her close, one arm wrapping around her shoulders, the other reaching into his jacket. "Ethan," she whispered. "Don't move," he murmured near her ear. The doors shuddered. Time fractured into sharp fragments. A flash of light, a gunshot that rang too loud in the confined space. Ethan turned, his body absorbing the momentum, shielding Haley completely. The doors burst open. Chaos followed shouting. Another shot. A blur of motion Haley couldn't fully process. When the emergency lights flickered on, it was over. Two men lay unconscious on the floor outside the elevator. Ethan stood between them and Haley, his breathing steady, his expression unreadable. Haley stared at him, heart pounding, hands trembling. "You didn't hesitate," she said. Ethan turned slowly. In the harsh emergency light, his face looked different, stripped of softness, etched with something darker. "No," he said. "You knew what to do." "Yes." The realization settled over her like cold water. "What kind of man are you?" Haley asked, her voice barely steady. Ethan didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, careful now, as if afraid of frightening her. "I'm someone who learned early that hesitation gets people killed," he said. "People like you," she asked. "People like me," he confirmed. Sirens wailed in the distance. Building security shouted from down the hall. The world rushed back in. Haley took a step away from him, creating space where closeness had been moments before. She needed it. He let her. "I don't think I know you," she said. Ethan nodded once. "That's fair." They parted without resolution that night. Ethan watched her leave, knowing something irrevocable had shifted. Haley walked home alone, replaying every moment, every look, every unexplained instinct. She was no longer standing at the edge of his world. She had seen inside it, and whatever Ethan was hiding, it was no longer something she could ignore. Haley did not hear from Ethan for 3 days. Not a message, not a call, not even one of those coincidental encounters that had begun to feel strangely comforting. The silence pressed in on her, heavy and deliberate, and she understood it for what it was: space. Not distance, but restraint. She told herself she was relieved. And yet, on the 4th night, when a knock sounded at her door just past midnight, her heart leapt before her mind could catch up. Ethan stood in the hallway, his face drawn, eyes darker than she remembered. He looked as though he hadn't slept. The man who had always seemed so controlled now carried tension in every line of his body. "We need to talk," he said. Haley hesitated only a second before stepping aside. The door closed behind him with a soft click that felt louder than it should have. "I thought you'd disappeared," she said, folding her arms to steady herself. "I almost did," Ethan replied. The honesty in his voice unsettled her more than any excuse might have. He looked around her apartment briefly, instinctively, then focused on her again. "You're not safe here anymore," he said. Haley laughed once, sharp and humorless. "You don't get to decide that." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm telling you instead of moving you without permission." The words sent a chill through her. "Moving me where?" she asked. "Somewhere secure," Ethan replied. "Somewhere they can't reach you." "They," Haley demanded. "You keep saying that like I'm supposed to understand." Ethan's jaw tightened. He seemed to weigh every word, as if choosing the wrong one could shatter something fragile between them. "Come with me," he said finally. "Just for tonight." Every instinct in Haley told her to refuse. And yet, the memory of the elevator, the gunshot, the way Ethan had moved without hesitation rose unbidden in her mind. "Fine," she said. "But no more half-truths." They drove in silence. The city thinned, lights giving way to darkness and guarded entrances. When they arrived, Haley realized they were not going to another apartment. It was a safe house. Steel doors, security codes, men who nodded at Ethan with unmistakable deference. Haley felt the ground shift beneath her feet as understanding began to form, piece by piece. Inside, Ethan poured her a glass of water and gestured for her to sit. He remained standing, hands clasped behind his back, as if sitting would be a surrender he wasn't ready to make. "You want the truth," he said, "so listen carefully." He told her everything he could without naming every crime. About power built in shadows. About enemies who did not forgive, only waited. About a man named Romano who had once been his ally and was now determined to destroy him. Haley listened, stunned, heart pounding. This was not the life she had imagined for him. Not the quiet coffee dates, not the man who cooked pasta and walked her home. "You're dangerous," she said when he finished. "Yes, and you brought that danger to my door." Ethan's gaze softened painfully. "I tried not to." Before she could respond, the lights flickered. Ethan moved instantly. "Stay here," he ordered, already pulling a weapon from beneath his jacket. "Ethan!" The sound of breaking glass cut her off. The attack came fast, too fast. Gunfire echoed through the space, sharp and disorienting. Haley pressed herself against the wall, breath shallow, as Ethan disappeared down the corridor. She heard him, then not the calm man she knew, but something harder. Commands barked low, footsteps, the unmistakable sound of bodies hitting the floor. Minutes stretched like hours. When Ethan returned, his shirt was torn, a smear of blood dark against the fabric. He looked at her, eyes scanning for injury before anything else. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No," Haley whispered. She stared at the blood on his hands. "Is that not yours?" he said. The room felt suddenly too small, too intimate for the reality pressing in around them. "You kill people," she said. The words heavy in her mouth. Ethan did not deny it. He only met her gaze and said quietly, "I protect what's mine." The sentence struck her harder than any confession. "Am I yours?" she asked. Ethan hesitated. The pause was answer enough. Haley took a step back, shaking her head. "You don't get to decide that either." "I know," he said again, "but I can't pretend this is something it's not." She turned away from him, pacing, trying to breathe through the storm inside her, fear tangled with something far more dangerous understanding. "You saved me," she said finally. "More than once." "Yes, but you also lied," she continued. "Every time you looked at me and didn't tell me who you really were." Ethan's voice dropped. "If I had told you sooner, you would have walked away." And now she asked. He looked at her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Now I don't know if I can let you." The admission was raw, terrifying in its honesty. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, reinforcements arriving, cleanup beginning, the world reasserting itself. Haley faced him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I care about you," she said. "And that scares me more than anything you just told me." Ethan stepped closer, stopping just short of touching her. "It should—" They stood there, inches apart, the air between them charged with everything unsaid. The truth was out now, not softened, not disguised, and nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be simple again. Morning arrived quietly, as if the night had not torn something open between them. Haley woke on the narrow bed in the safe house, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, her mind replaying fragments of gunfire, Ethan's voice, the blood on his hands. For a moment, she considered leaving before he returned. It would have been easier, cleaner. She didn't. The sound of soft footsteps outside the room pulled her upright. The door opened, not with caution, but with familiarity. A small figure stepped in first. The girl couldn't have been more than 6. She had dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail and wide, observant eyes that took in Haley without fear. Not curious, assessing. Behind her stood Ethan, a different kind of tension in his posture, protective in a way Haley hadn't seen before. "You're awake," he said quietly. The girl tilted her head. "Is she the lady from the pictures?" Haley's breath caught. "Pictures." Ethan closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, then opened them again. "Yes," he said. "She is—" The girl stepped closer, undeterred. "I'm Lily. Haley," she replied automatically, crouching so they were eye level. "It's nice to meet you." Lily studied her face with unsettling seriousness, then smiled. "You don't look scary." Something in Haley's chest softened painfully. "Neither do you." Only then did she look back at Ethan. Understanding arrived slowly, heavily, like a door closing behind her. The resemblance was unmistakable, the same eyes, the same quiet intensity. Not learned, inherited. "She's yours," Haley said. Ethan nodded. "My daughter." The word landed between them, reshaping everything. Ethan moved through the safe house with a gentleness that felt almost foreign. He prepared breakfast himself, checked every corner twice, adjusted Lily's jacket before they stepped outside into the crisp morning air. Haley watched him from a distance, absorbing this new version of the man she thought she knew. This Ethan knelt to tie shoelaces. This Ethan listened carefully when Lily spoke, as if her words mattered more than anyone else's. This Ethan smiled not often, but genuinely. "She doesn't know everything," he said later, as they walked along a quiet path lined with trees. "Only what she needs to." "And what does she know?" Haley asked. "That I keep her safe," Ethan replied. "No matter what." The truth of it was undeniable. Haley saw it in the way his gaze never left Lily for long, the way his body always positioned itself between her and the world. Lily, for her part, took to Haley with surprising ease. She asked questions, held Haley's hand without hesitation, laughed when Haley made up stories about clouds shaped like animals. It was impossible not to respond. "This place is boring," Lily announced at one point. Ethan sighed. "It's temporary." "Everything is temporary," Lily said solemnly, then brightened. "Except people who stay." Haley felt Ethan's gaze shift to her. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Haley found Ethan standing outside, staring into the darkness beyond the fence. The man who ruled shadows looked strangely vulnerable under the open sky. "You didn't tell me," Haley said softly. "I wasn't ready," Ethan replied. "And I didn't want you anywhere near her until I was sure." "Sure of what?" "That you wouldn't disappear." The honesty startled her. "I might still—" "I know," he said, "but I had to take that risk." She leaned against the railing beside him. "She's beautiful. She's everything," he said simply. Haley turned to him. "Is that why you do all this? The violence? The power?" "Yes," Ethan said. "And because once you're in, there's no clean way out." The next days passed in a fragile calm. Too calm. Haley sensed it the way animals sense a coming storm. Ethan grew quieter, more alert. He took calls outside, lowered his voice, made decisions without explanation. One afternoon, Lily tugged on Haley's sleeve. "Daddy's scared," she whispered. Haley's heart tightened. "Why do you think that?" "Because when he's scared, he doesn't talk," Lily said matter-of-factly. That night, Haley overheard Ethan speaking into his phone, His voice low and sharp. A name surfaced, carried on the wind like a thread. Romano. Ethan ended the call and stood still for a long moment, fists clenched. He did not notice Haley until she spoke. "You're not telling me everything," she said. "No," he admitted, "because if I do, you'll leave." "And if you don't?" she asked. He met her gaze, something raw and conflicted there. "Then I can still pretend you're safe." The words chilled her. Days later, Ethan insisted on staying inside while Haley took Lily out to buy supplies in the nearby town. He watched them leave, unease shadowing his eyes. "You'll be careful," he said. "Always." Haley replied. But as they drove back, Haley noticed the road was too empty, too quiet. Her phone vibrated once. An unknown number. A single message. "You're closer than you think." Haley's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Lily looked up at her, sensing the change. "What's wrong?" she asked. Haley forced a smile. "Nothing. Sweetheart." But her heart was already racing. Miles away, Ethan felt it, the sudden, suffocating certainty that something had slipped beyond his control. For the first time since Haley had entered his life, he realized the danger was no longer theoretical. It was personal. The road narrowed as Haley drove back toward the safe house, trees pressing in on both sides like silent witnesses. The sky had begun to dim, clouds gathering low and heavy, the air thick with something unspoken. Lily hummed softly in the passenger seat, swinging her legs, unaware of the tension coiling tighter with every mile. Haley checked the rearview mirror for the third time in under a minute. Nothing. And yet the message lingered on her phone, burning behind her eyes. "You're closer than you think." She told herself it was a scare tactic, a psychological trick. Ethan had mentioned Romano favored fear over force. Still, her hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles whitening as she slowed slightly, scanning the road ahead. "Are we almost there?" Lily asked. "Soon," Haley said, forcing warmth into her voice. "Did you find everything you wanted?" Lily nodded. "Daddy likes the blue cereal best." Haley smiled despite herself. "I'll remember that." The road curved sharply, and then she saw it, a black SUV, parked at an angle across the narrow lane. Haley's breath caught. She slowed instinctively, heart hammering. The engine of the SUV was off. No one stood beside it. The silence was absolute. "We can't go this way," Haley murmured, already reaching for her phone. There was no signal. Before she could reverse, another car slid silently into place behind them, blocking the road back. Its doors opened almost leisurely. Men stepped out. They didn't rush. They didn't shout. They moved with the confidence of people who knew resistance would be brief. Lily turned in her seat, eyes wide. Haley's heart clenched. "It's okay," she said, though fear flooded her veins. "Stay inside. Don't move." She stepped out of the car before they could force her to. The air felt colder immediately, the weight of attention pressing down on her. One of the men smiled. "Miss Haley, you were easier to find than expected." "What do you want?" she demanded. "To deliver a message," he replied. "From Mr. Romano." Her chest tightened at the name. "He says," the man continued calmly, "that you're very important to Ethan, and that makes you useful." The word sent a shiver through her. "Leave her out of this," Haley said. "She's a child." The man glanced toward Lily, still sitting frozen inside the car. "So we see." Haley moved without thinking, positioning herself between them and the car. "If you want something, take me." The man's smile widened slightly. That was always the plan. They didn't touch Lily. Not then. They didn't need to. The threat was already complete. Within minutes. Haley was in the back of the SUV, hands trembling, mind racing. She replayed every conversation with Ethan, every moment she had sensed him holding something back. This was the cost of that silence. Miles away, Ethan felt it. The sensation hit him like a blade between the ribs. Sudden, sharp, unmistakable. He had been mid-conversation with one of his men when the call came through. "Sir," the voice said, tight with urgency. "We've lost visual on Haley and Lily. Vehicles intercepted on the West Road. The world narrowed to a single point." "Where are they?" Ethan demanded. "We're tracking." Ethan was already moving, already issuing orders, vehicles mobilized, weapons armed, lines crossed that had been carefully avoided. This was his fault. He had known Romano would strike. He had known Haley was vulnerable. And still, he had chosen not to tell her everything, believing ignorance would keep her safe. He had been wrong. By the time Ethan reached the abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, dusk had fully fallen. The building loomed dark and skeletal against the fading light. His men secured the perimeter silently, efficiently. Ethan entered alone. Inside, Haley sat bound to a chair beneath a single hanging bulb. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with fury when she saw him. "You lied to me," she said before he could speak. The words cut deeper than any weapon. "I know," Ethan replied quietly, stopping a few feet away. "I'm sorry." Romano stepped into the light then, applauding softly. "Touching," he said. "Truly. I almost feel bad interrupting." Ethan's gaze never left Haley. "I'll get you out," he said. Haley laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "You already did this to me," she said. "By deciding for me. By thinking you knew better." Romano smiled, enjoying every second. "She's perceptive," he said. "That's what makes this so interesting." He circled them slowly. "You see, Ethan, I didn't take her to hurt her. Not directly. I took her to show her the truth." Haley looked at Ethan, tears threatening now. "You brought this into our lives." Ethan swallowed. "Yes. And you would have kept lying?" she pressed. "If they hadn't taken me?" The silence was answer enough. Romano stopped in front of Ethan. "So here's the deal," he said pleasantly. "Walk away. Leave the city. Leave your empire. And she goes free." "And Lily," Ethan asked. Romano chuckled. "She was never part of the bargain. But perhaps next time?" Ethan's hands curled into fists. The old instinct surged violence, certainty, blood. Ending Romano here would be easy. Haley shook her head, eyes locked on his. "Don't," she whispered. "If you do this your way, nothing changes." For the first time, Ethan hesitated not because he feared the consequences, but because he saw himself through her eyes. A man who controlled everything. A man who decided for others. A man whose protection came at the cost of trust. Romano leaned closer to Haley. "He won't choose you," he murmured. "Men like him never do." Ethan spoke then, his voice steady but stripped bare. "I already chose," he said, "and I chose wrong." He lowered his weapon. The room went still. In that moment, Haley understood the depth of Ethan's mistake and the cost he was finally willing to pay for it. Silence settled over the warehouse like a held breath. Ethan stood with his weapon lowered, the decision still vibrating in the air between them. Romano's smile faltered not entirely, but enough to reveal surprise. He had expected rage, violence, blood. He had not expected restraint. Haley watched Ethan closely, searching his face for hesitation, for regret. She found neither. What she saw instead was something far more unsettling: acceptance. Not surrender, but clarity. Romano recovered quickly. He always did. "How noble," he said lightly. "You think putting the gun down makes you different." "It makes me honest," Ethan replied. Romano laughed. "Honest men don't survive our world." Ethan met his gaze without blinking. Then maybe it's time that world ended. Romano's eyes flicked toward Haley. "Calculating. You see," he said to her. "He's still deciding. Still shaping the outcome without asking what you want." Haley inhaled slowly. Her wrists ached from the restraints, but the pain grounded her. For too long, she had been reacting, waiting for men to arrive, to explain, to decide. That version of her felt distant now, almost unrecognizable. "I know exactly what I want," she said. Both men turned to her. Romano arched an eyebrow. "Do tell." Haley's voice was steady. "I want this to end without another lie, without another person choosing for me." She looked at Ethan then, holding his gaze. "You don't get to save me by destroying yourself, and you don't get to protect me by hiding the truth ever again." Ethan nodded once. "I understand." Romano scoffed. "You think understanding changes anything?" Haley smiled faintly. "It already has." Moments later, she was free. Not because Romano allowed it, but because Ethan's men had moved quietly, efficiently cutting power, sealing exits, dismantling the trap without a single shot fired. Romano's expression darkened as control slipped from his grasp inch by inch. "This isn't over," Romano said, backing away as the walls closed in. "No," Ethan agreed. "It's not." They left the warehouse together under the cover of night, the city sprawling ahead of them, indifferent and vast. Haley expected the adrenaline to crash, for fear to take over. Instead, what she felt was resolve. They drove in silence until the lights of the city thinned. When Ethan finally pulled over, He didn't turn the engine off. He simply rested his hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. "You should leave," he said quietly. "Take Lily. Go somewhere safe. Somewhere far from me." Haley studied him. The man who had once seemed untouchable now looked fragile in a way that felt honest. "Is that what you want?" she asked. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. "It's what you deserve." She shook her head. "I'm done being someone who waits to be abandoned for my own good." He turned to her, surprise flickering across his face. "Haley, I'm not staying because I need protection," she continued. "And I'm not leaving because you're dangerous. I'm staying because this time I choose." The words settled between them, reshaping the ground beneath their feet. "But this only works," she added, "if things change." Ethan swallowed. "Name them." "No secrets," Haley said. "No decisions about my life made behind closed doors. And no more pretending you can carry everything alone." Ethan nodded, each condition cutting deeper than any threat Romano had ever made. "Agreed. And Lily," Haley said softly. "She deserves truth too. When the time is right." "Yes," Ethan said. "She does." They returned to the safe house before dawn. Lily ran to Haley the moment she saw her, clinging tight, as if afraid she might disappear. Ethan watched them, something unsteady forming in his chest. Later, as Lily slept, Haley stood by the window, the horizon slowly brightening. Romano had not been defeated. Not yet. He would regroup. He always did. But for the first time. Haley felt prepared not because she was shielded from the truth, but because she was standing inside it. Ethan joined her, careful not to crowd her space. "You changed the rules tonight," he said. "So did you," Haley replied. "You stopped trying to control the outcome." "That terrifies me," he admitted. She looked at him, eyes soft but unyielding. It means you care." Outside, the city stirred back to life. Somewhere in the distance, Romano was already planning his next move. Ethan knew it. Haley knew it too. But the balance had shifted. Haley was no longer the woman who waited at empty tables or trusted half-promises. She had stepped into the center of the storm and refused to be moved. And for the first time, Ethan realized that loving her would not make him weaker. It would demand that he become something else entirely. The calm that followed the warehouse was deceptive. Haley sensed it the way one senses pressure before a storm, subtle, suffocating, threaded with unease. Ethan became quieter in the days that followed. His attention split between Lily's laughter and conversations held behind closed doors. He honored every promise he had made to Haley. No lies, no vanished phone calls, no decisions without her knowledge. But honesty did not make the danger disappear. It sharpened it. Romano did not retreat. He repositioned. The first sign came as a gift delivered to the safe house gate, a small blue box, tied with a silver ribbon. No return address. No note. Inside lay a child's bracelet, beaded in shades of blue. Lily's bracelet. Haley felt her breath leave her lungs as Ethan lifted it from the box, his fingers rigid. Lily was safe inside, coloring at the kitchen table, humming to herself. That was the point. Romano didn't need to strike. He needed to remind them that he could. "This is bait," Ethan said, his voice low and controlled. "Then he's trying to make you angry?" Haley replied. "So you'll do what he wants." Ethan looked at her then, truly looked, as if measuring the distance he had already traveled from the man he used to be. "He wants me to end it my way," he said. "He wants blood. And if you give it to him," Haley said softly, "you prove him right." The invitation arrived that night. A location, a time, no threats, no demands, just an understanding that this was the endgame. Ethan prepared with ruthless efficiency, but not secrecy. He told Haley everything where he was going, what Romano expected, what the risks were. When he finished, he waited. "I'm coming," Haley said. "No," Ethan replied immediately. "This is exactly what we agreed would stop," she said calmly. "You don't get to decide alone." Ethan hesitated, the old instinct roaring back. Then he nodded. "Then we do this together." They left Lily in trusted hands before dawn. The city was quiet as they drove, streets washed pale by early light. The building Romano had chosen was abandoned, skeletal, a monument to things left unfinished. It rose from the concrete like a challenge. Inside, Romano was waiting. He stood near the edge of the upper floor, hands clasped behind his back, smiling as if welcoming guests into his home. "Ethan," he said pleasantly, "you look tired. And you look predictable." Ethan replied, Romano laughed, still sharp. And you brought her. His gaze slid to Haley. Of course you did. Haley met his eyes without flinching. I'm not your leverage, she said. I'm the reason this ends. Romano's smile thinned. Everyone thinks they're the exception. He gestured, and armed men emerged from the shadows. Ethan felt the familiar pull toward violence, the certainty that had always guided him. He could end this in seconds. He could choose the simple path. Romano stepped closer. You know what to do, he murmured. You always have. Kill me, and this stops. Walk away, and it never does. The gun felt heavy in Ethan's hand. Haley stepped forward. The movement was small but decisive, placing herself between Ethan and Romano. Not shielding him, grounding him. No, she said, her voice steady. This is where it changes. Romano's eyes gleamed. Careful, he warned. You don't know what you're asking him to become. I know exactly who he is, Haley replied, and who he doesn't want to be anymore. Ethan felt the moment stretch, thin as wire. Every instinct screamed at him to pull the trigger, to finish what he had started years ago. He looked at Romano, at the violence coiled behind the smile. Then he looked at Haley, and he lowered the gun. The room went still. Romano's expression hardened, disbelief cracking through. You won't, he said. You can't. I can, Ethan replied. And I am. He turned away not in weakness, but in refusal. Around them, sirens wailed, growing closer. The plan had never been to outgun Romano. It had been to outlast him, to expose him, to strip him of the shadows he thrived in. Romano laughed, sharp and bitter. You think this ends me? No, Ethan said. I think it ends us. As authorities flooded the building, Romano's control unraveled. He was led away still smiling, but the smile was hollow now, stripped of triumph. Haley watched him go, the weight of what had nearly happened settling slowly into her bones. Outside, dawn broke fully over the city. Ethan stood beside her, silent, hands empty. You crossed a line tonight, Haley said quietly. Yes, he agreed, not the one he wanted. Ethan looked at her, something unspoken and fierce in his eyes. I didn't know if I could stop. You did, she said. That's what matters. For the first time since this began, the future felt uncertain in a different way, not dark, not inevitable, just open. And that, Haley realized, was far more terrifying than anything Romano had ever threatened. Romano's fall did not arrive with fireworks or headlines. It came quietly, the way real endings often do through sealed indictments, frozen accounts, allies who suddenly forgot his name. Ethan watched it unfold from a distance, reading reports without satisfaction, without relief. There was no triumph in watching a man lose everything when you knew exactly how that kind of emptiness felt. Power, he had learned, did not vanish. It only changed hands. And this time, Ethan was letting go of his own. The decision settled over him slowly in the days that followed, not as panic, not as loss, but as clarity. He began dismantling the structure he had built piece by piece, transferring control, erasing his presence, closing doors that had once felt permanent. Men who had followed him without question now listened in silence as he gave orders that would make him irrelevant. You're walking away, one of them said finally, disbelief sharp in his voice. I'm stepping out, Ethan corrected. There's a difference. What about retaliation? There will be attempts, Ethan said calmly. But no war. Not for me. They didn't understand. He hadn't expected them to. At the safe house, life moved differently now. Softer. Lily returned to school under a new name, her laughter filling rooms that had once echoed with tension. Haley adjusted too, learning the rhythms of a life that no longer revolved around hiding, but hadn't yet learned how to be ordinary. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the walls in amber light, Haley found Ethan standing alone on the back porch, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. You don't drink anymore, she observed. I don't need it, he replied. She joined him, leaning against the railing. You've been distant. I've been deciding, he said. She waited. He had learned that silence no longer scared her. There's a house, Ethan continued. Outside the city, quiet. No guards, no walls. Haley turned to him. And no shadows. He met her gaze. That's the idea. And the past, she asked gently. Ethan exhaled. I'll carry it, just not into our future. The word our lingered between them, fragile and hopeful. Later that night, Lily fell asleep curled between them on the couch, her small hand gripping Ethan's sleeve as if afraid he might disappear. Haley watched him stroke his daughter's hair with reverent care. The man who had once ruled fear, now ruled by something infinitely more dangerous: love. "She trusts you," Haley said quietly. "I don't take that lightly," Ethan replied. Neither did Haley. Days passed, then weeks. The city slowly released its grip on them. The constant alertness faded into something gentler, though it never vanished completely. Healing, Haley realized, was not forgetting. It was choosing to stay present despite memory. One afternoon, Ethan took Haley back to the restaurant. The same one. It was quieter this time, sunlight streaming through tall windows, the tables half filled. Haley recognized the place immediately, her breath catching before she could stop it. "You remembered," she said. "I never forgot," Ethan replied. They sat at the same table. The chair across from her was no longer empty. "I was waiting that night," Haley said softly. "Not just for him, for proof that I mattered." "And did you find it?" Ethan asked. She looked at him, at the man who had almost lost himself before finding something worth becoming better for. "Yes," she said. But it took time to believe it. Ethan reached into his jacket, then stopped, hesitation flickering across his face. Haley noticed. "What is it?" "There's something I want to ask," he said. "And for once, I don't want to assume the answer." He set the small box on the table but did not open it. "I won't promise you a life without fear," Ethan said quietly, "or without scars. But I will promise this: no more lies, no more disappearing, no more decisions made without you." Haley's throat tightened. "If you choose to walk away," he continued, "I will let you. And I will be grateful for the time you gave me." She placed her hand over his. "And if I don't," Ethan's voice barely held steady, "then I'll spend the rest of my life earning the trust you give me." Tears blurred her vision, but she smiled. "You already are." He opened the box then, the ring simple and elegant, chosen with care rather than extravagance. "I'm not asking you to save me," Ethan said. "I'm asking you to walk with me." Haley looked at the ring, then at him, then at the reflection of the woman she had been, the one who waited alone, who accepted absence as fate. She was not that woman anymore. "Yes," she said. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, the weight of the words sinking deep. When he looked at her again, his expression held something new: peace. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that an empire had ended not in fire, but in choice, and that the most dangerous man in the room had finally learned how to come home. The house outside the city did not announce itself. It sat at the end of a narrow road lined with tall trees, the kind that whispered when the wind moved through them. No gates, no guards, no cameras perched like watchful eyes, just a porch, wide windows, and a quiet that felt earned rather than enforced. Haley stood at the doorway, Lily's small hand tucked into hers, and felt something loosen in her chest. "This is it?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "This is where we stop running." Lily didn't wait for permission. She darted inside, laughter echoing through the empty rooms as she explored, claiming corners and windows as if she had always known they would be hers. Haley followed more slowly, taking in the light spilling across wooden floors, the warmth in a place that had never known fear. Ethan watched them from the doorway. For years, home had been a concept to him, not a location, something temporary, conditional. Now, standing there, he understood that home was not built with walls or protection. It was built with presence. The days that followed unfolded gently. Haley learned the rhythm of mornings without urgency, of coffee brewed slowly, and conversations that didn't end in plans or contingencies. Ethan learned how to be still, how to let silence exist without scanning it for threats. Lily learned what it meant to fall asleep without checking if the door was locked twice. They were not free of shadows. None of them pretended otherwise. But the shadows no longer dictated every breath. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the trees, Haley found Ethan in the backyard, kneeling beside Lily as they planted something small and green into the soil. "What is it?" Haley asked. Lily beamed. "A tree. Daddy says it takes time, but it stays." Haley's throat tightened. Later that evening, when Lily was asleep, Ethan and Haley sat on the porch, the air cool and fragrant with earth. Fireflies blinked softly in the distance, brief sparks against the dark. "I used to believe happiness was something you took," Ethan said quietly, "something you guarded fiercely because it would be stolen if you didn't. And now," Haley asked, "now I think it's something you build." He replied, "Slowly, together." She rested her head against his shoulder. "You're different here." "So are you," he said. "You don't look like you're waiting anymore." She smiled. "I'm not." The wedding was small. No spectacle, no press, no reminders of a past they had chosen not to drag forward. Just a handful of people who mattered, a quiet clearing near the house, and vows spoken without pretense. When Ethan took Haley's hands, his voice did not waver. "I won't promise perfection," he said. "But I promise presence. I promise honesty, even when it's hard. And I promise that you will never have to wonder if I'm coming back." Haley met his gaze, steady and sure. "I promise to stay," she said. "Not because I'm afraid to leave, but because I choose you, every day." Lily stood between them, clutching a basket of flowers that she scattered with enthusiastic abandon. When the vows were done, she wrapped her arms around Haley's waist and looked up. "Does this mean you're really staying?" she asked. Haley knelt, eyes bright. "It means I'm home." Life did not suddenly become perfect. There were nights when Ethan woke from dreams he couldn't shake, when old instincts flared and he had to remind himself that the past was no longer in control. There were moments when Haley felt the weight of loving someone who had lived too many lives before her. They faced those moments together, without secrets, without retreat. That was the difference. Months later, on an unremarkable evening, they returned to the city for dinner. The restaurant was the same. The table was the same. Haley paused at the entrance, memory washing over her the empty chair, the quiet humiliation, the stranger in the shadows. Ethan squeezed her hand. "Are you ready?" She nodded. They sat. Across from her, the chair was filled, not just with Ethan's presence, but with intention. He wasn't early. He wasn't late. He was there. Halfway through dinner, Haley laughed at something Lily said, the sound light and unguarded. Ethan watched her, something warm and steady settling in his chest. This was the life he had almost lost. As they stood to leave, Haley glanced back at the table once more, not with regret, but with gratitude. That night had not broken her. It had led her here, outside. The city lights shimmered, distant and harmless. Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "I spent years thinking love was a weakness," he said. "And now," Haley asked, "and now I know it was the thing that saved me." He replied. They walked away together, Lily skipping ahead, the future unwritten but no longer frightening. Because this time, no one was waiting alone. This time, everyone arrived.